And US President Donald Trump's tariff tango continues. In fact, he has now decided to negotiate tariffs with the EU. Days after announcing a 50% reciprocal tariff rate, Trump confirmed in a post on social media platform Truth Social that he has extended the deadline on tariffs till July 9, following a request from the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Von der Leyen and Trump had a telephonic conversation on Sunday, remember, and the EU Commission President confirmed this development in a statement, also saying that Europe is ready to advance talks swiftly and decisively. Trump had warned on Friday that the tariffs could take effect by June 1, citing stalled negotiations. But after the call, he agreed to extend the deadline to July 9. And this gives both sides a narrow window to finalize a deal and avoid a transatlantic trade war. The trade standoff comes against the backdrop of a significant imbalance. In the year 2024, the U.S. goods trade deficit with the European Union stood at $236 billion. However, when factoring in services where U.S. firms dominate, the European Commission estimates the total deficit at just 50 billion euros, or roughly $57 billion. In fact, Trump has already imposed 3 rounds of tariffs on the bloc, including 25% on steel and aluminium and a 10% base duty on imports, with a 20% reciprocal levy temporarily on hold. Brussels has warned it is ready to impose tariffs up to around $113 billion on U.S. goods if negotiations fail. The EU trade chief emphasized the need for mutual respect, not threats. And Germany's finance minister, meanwhile, also weighed in, urging serious negotiations and warning that further provocations could damage both the U.S. and European economies. With the July 9 deadline now set, the next 6 weeks will be crucial in shaping the future of US-EU trade ties.
Beyond that, it implicates other executive powers as well. Yeah.
And with us on the broadcast from Brussels is William Denslo, who's been tracking those developments very closely. Hi, William. Give us a sense of where the EU currently stands as far as Trump's tariff tango is concerned. The moves, of course, have kept not just the EU, but the entire world on edge over the last couple of weeks, more than a couple of weeks.
Well, what a difference a few days makes. It was on Friday that the US president issued this social media post on his Truth Social website saying that he was putting in place this June 1st 50% tariff deadline, citing that negotiations between the US and the European Union were, as he put it, going nowhere. However, after this phone call that was, according to the European Commission, instigated by Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, US President Donald Trump has agreed to the EU's request to push back that deadline to July 9th to give a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to negotiations. Now, when quizzed by press just a little while ago, the European Commission stated that essentially what this phone conversation between von der Leyen and President Trump provides is more impetus and really provides a fast track for these negotiations. So there's certainly optimism that things can begin to gather pace when it comes to momentum in these trade discussions. Evidence of that, the fact that Maroš Šefčovič, the Commission trade representative, will be having a conversation this afternoon with the US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for joining us with those updates. All right, just to dig deeper into what's going on with us on the broadcast this minute from Chicago is Greg Swenson to help us just understand what's happening a little better. Greg, I want to ask you first for your assessment of what Trump is really trying to do here.
Well, I think President Trump is just trying to get to the outcome that he wants, and he does that in a different way than other leaders and other diplomats. He's not traditionally diplomatic, although he can be. In this case, I think he just needed to push this along. There's some urgency here. I think it's really important for the U.S. to announce a few more trade deals, specifically with the EU and India and some other large trading partners. So, I think he really was frustrated, and this is his way of moving things along. He likes to be provocative, he likes to be unorthodox, but he has an end game in sight here, and it's really important for the U.S. and for the EU as well to get to the end zone. And I do believe that they did need more time. So I think the president understands that. He made the announcement Friday to get things going, and in many ways it worked because the EU has come back and said, yes, we need more time, but we will get back to business and move things along.
Right. What is your suggestion maybe on how the EU should really be navigating this, given what's happened over the last few months vis-a-vis trade negotiations with other parts of the world as well? What lessons perhaps, and what notes could the EU take from all of that to actually be in that position where it does engage with Trump in that way?
It's a great question. I think they have to take a page out of the UK, the United Kingdom's playbook, who, they got to a deal, or at least an agreement on the basics of a deal rather quickly. And that was the first major announcement, first major trade announcement that came out of the US. And if you recall, in the Oval Office only a few weeks ago, they had a very diplomatic meeting with the leadership from the UK in President Trump's Oval Office. So I think they need to, get down to business, make some concessions that are not very traditional for the EU. But I would point out that the EU has a challenge. They have 28 countries that have to ratify any agreement, whereas the United Kingdom, thanks to Brexit, was able to negotiate on their own behalf. So, von der Leyen has some challenges ahead. I think it's not going to be easy, but I do think they have to take a page out of the UK playbook, and they have to just bend on some of their regulatory burden, not just for the negotiations with the United States, but to liberate their own economies. They are really hampered by a regulatory state that is overwhelming. It's a regulatory burden on the economy and on consumers. So they could probably check a few boxes. They could accomplish a number of things here. One is the trade deal with the U.S. by backing away from some of those regulations, but also liberating their own economies.
Brett Svensson, appreciate as always you joining us with those perspectives.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.